So, what made me cranky about Wonder Woman 1984? Hilariously obvious mannequin stunt doubles. It's a stupid little thing, I know, but it perfectly encapsulates the total lack of polish that permeates everything in this movie. I mean, I get that it takes place in the 80s when action movies had corny moments where actors often suddenly transformed into crash test dummies when things got really dangerous because we didn't have the luxury of doing things with CGI, but we don't have that problem anymore. And if there's one thing this movie doesn't seem to want to do, it's replicate the feel of the 80s. So why not just spend a few dollars of that CGI budget to dress up those dummies or add some smoke or something so that it isn't perfectly clear that you're looking at a stunt woman rolling across the ground with dolls strapped to her chest. Even your average semi-competent YouTuber making a movie in his backyard would at least edit around it, so it's pretty shocking to see that from a superhero blockbuster in 2020. Especially since director Patty Jenkins clearly had no problem chopping every other action scene to bits. I guess this is the one time where having Zack Snyder around might actually have helped things. It's just plain lazy filmmaking, made all the more disappointing when you realize they got an extra 6 months to play around with the final cut of this thing before they released it, and they probably would have delayed it another 6 if they hadn't made the incredibly brave decision to take on the soon-to-be ex-president of the United States. Which unfortunately made it imperative they rush their cinematic statement out there before that bad orange man managed to slip away into irrelevance. People might not have realized just how bad and orange he was otherwise. I wonder what Hollywood's gonna do now that Trump isn't gonna be the president anymore. Trump's been their default bad guy for so long, I'm not sure they'll be able to write villains without him. I guess we'll just get a string of disaster movies where there are no bad guys, just good, honest public servants beset by all manner of unpredictable catastrophes that hampered all of their otherwise good intentions. Anyway, this version of Trump is played by the Mandalorian himself, Pedro Pascal, and as you can tell, his performance has all the subtlety of a jackhammer. Ostensibly, he's playing the character of Maxwell Lord from the comics, but they might as well just have called him Trump since even the script can't help but ham-fistedly shove their idea of Trump's motivations into the movie at all times. Cartoonish caricatures like that rarely make for good villains outside of actual cartoons, and this is no exception. Sure, they try to add a bit of sympathetic backstory to take the edge off it, but by the time you get that backstory, there's no reason to care. It's like finding out Thanos' reasons for snapping after he's already killed half the universe. Nobody's gonna listen because they're too busy going for his head at that point. That's really not the worst of it though, because if it worked for the story they were telling, it would at least be palatable. But it doesn't. This antagonist has basically nothing to do with Wonder Woman's arc in this movie, and while I can't get into too much detail without spoilers, in the end she doesn't even care enough about him to contend with him directly. Virtually everything he does is just an excuse for the film to change locations for a new action scene, when it really doesn't need to do that. They have several perfectly functional stories already set up, none of which need them to leave Washington, D.C., where Diana has apparently made her home, and pretty much all of them get sidetracked so that they can try to give this film more global stakes, which again is not necessary. Not every movie has to involve saving the world, and considering in this continuity, Diana supposedly went into hiding until Batman and Superman showed up, this one almost certainly shouldn't have. In fact, the least enjoyable parts of the film are those saving the world action sequences. They don't have any weight because they don't connect to anything in particular, they're not terribly well shot, and they don't make particularly good use of Wonder Woman's powers either, so they're neither exciting nor interesting. Also, as an aside, seeing Wonder Woman swing around on a lasso from building to building like Spider-Man just never feels right, especially because the green screen is terrible and the lasso has to start getting ridiculously long in order for her to keep doing it. I get that it's a magic lasso so it can have infinite length, but that just makes you question all the times she doesn't use it when having an infinitely long unbreakable rope would solve all of her problems. Instead, the most compelling parts of Wonder Woman 1984 come from Diana's relationship with Steve Trevor. As you've seen from the trailers, Steve has been revived from the dead and transported to the 80s thanks to some movie magic, and we get to see him marvel at all the ways the world has changed since World War I. Of course, since the movie is lazy and sloppy though, quite a bit of it is just straight up role reversal for the fish out of water stuff in the first movie. And as I said before, they don't seem to care much about capturing the feel of the 80s, so it's an incredibly shallow read on things. It's only when Diana gets to show Steve the advancements of aerospace tech that we really see a glimpse of what this movie could have been. Still, Gal Gadot and Chris Pine have such wonderful chemistry that even the low-hanging fruit has enough charm to it to be enjoyable. I am once again reminded how much it sucks that the Star Trek reboot wasted Chris Pine by making his version of James T. Kirk an insufferable douchebag. Just like pretty much every other character in this movie, in fact. They have to be that way in order to set up the other potential antagonist, who, like the Trump stand-in, exists as a cartoonish stereotype, only in this case it's of your typical nerdy wallflower. That's Kristen Wiig's character Barbara Minerva, aka Cheetah, who is apparently surrounded by people who have short-term memory loss, because even the HR lady who interviewed her several times before hiring her doesn't remember her at all. And by that I mean like, hi, nice to meet you level of memory loss here. Such is how overlooked this poor, awkward geek is, in case you wanted Kristen Wiig to have to try and convey this point through that thing we call acting. As I said, subtlety is not this film's strong suit. Here too, though, we see the makings of an actual movie, since Diana befriends her, and this touches off an admiration that inevitably turns to envy, but then Trump comes back in, so the whole movie forgets about her for a while until they need a speed bump to stop Wonder Woman from ending things a half hour too early for the writer's tastes. Like the first Wonder Woman, 1984 simply doesn't know the story has climaxed already and it's time to stop, so it just keeps right on going, even though it should be over. So much of this film is like this. It's just messy. Plot threads that go nowhere. Things that exist to do one plot thing and one plot thing only, and then have no purpose beyond that, even if they might really be useful again later. They couldn't even get a halfway decent Reagan impersonator for all of the 5 minutes he's required to be there. In fact, the entire opening sequence has absolutely nothing to do with the rest of the movie. It's just an excuse to show Themyscira and that terrible child actress from Wonder Woman 1 again. Cut all that crap out. Make the movie about Steve and Diana dealing with his mystical resurrection, and it could have been everything from a delightful romantic comedy to a heartfelt exploration of love and loss. Or ditch the Trump nonsense and let the two female heavyweights punch it out because one wishes she were the other. Either way, at least it would be consistent and potentially engaging as opposed to the boring, discombobulated mess that it is. Now, normally my ratings hinge on how and when you should see a movie, but I'm a few weeks late, and most of you still can't even go to a theater, so it kind of breaks the scale. I hate to starve any open theaters of potential revenue, but this just isn't worth it. Hell, it might be better to download it just so that the crash test dummies will be less obvious than they would be on a giant high-definition screen, though I don't even know if I'd consider it worth the cost of the download either. If for some reason you do go to a theater where fast-forwarding through the credits is not an option, there is a mid-credit sequence. Like most of the stuff in this movie, it doesn't really mean anything other than giving you a cute cameo, so you probably can look it up online instead of wasting any more of your time waiting for it. That's what I thought about Wonder Woman 1984 anyway. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Lasso the like button and swing over to hit subscribe if you liked the video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. I have something to complain about.